think the individuals involved are all here. If that's sounds about right. Okay, so the first item on the agenda is opening a hearing regarding vicious dog hearing to consider the potential violation of a dog ordinance and protective order. So just to kind of go over briefly where we're at. This is related to Elsa Hingpin's dogs being found at large, for which we have a complaint which was in the file. And the reason this is kind of kicked into a vicious dog hearing is one of those dogs was previously found to be potentially vicious from previous proceedings and running at large incidences. So it's a little ambiguous to me as to how to kind of consider the circumstances, but because there are two dogs, one of which was not originally involved in the protective order. So I don't think I think this is pretty open and clear. We have a complaint that was submitted that summarizes the dogs being found at large and running unattended over by the town office. It then took an hour or so before they were confirmed to be, contained and back on the owner's property. So we had that documentation that was in the folder. We also have a statement from the owner that was in the folder that kind of alludes to what she expects is the reason for the dogs being at large. To my knowledge, there wasn't any other interactions with the animals. And in addition to that, we have the statement from Buffy that summarizes her interactions and involvement with trying to get the dogs contained. Does anybody have any questions about the documents that were submitted as evidence and testimony to the circumstances?
I don't.
So with that, we'll kind of open it up to some. Oh, great. Hi, Buffy. We started a little bit early and are just kind of summarizing things now. And I was about to just kind of turn it over to the rest of the board for discussion.
Okay.
I think the facts as they're presented are pretty clear. I think what needs to be worked through is some interpretation of the ordinance and some dialogue around what kind of findings we may want to coalesce around and any actions that we may want to take as a result of that.
Okay.
If that sounds about right to you. So I think the best way to kind of serve that up would be to kind of lay out a little bit of the history and make sure we're being clear about which animal we're referring to. So
Jordan and Jamie, you were both here for earlier hearings.
Yeah, correct.
And the three of us were not, so. Yeah.
Yes.
Whatever clarity you can offer would be helpful.
So in brief summary, there was the initial protective order that was issued in 2023 relative to the original event. One of those dogs is deceased, and the other one, Trixie, who still is still alive and across the street, was found to be potentially vicious as a result of those proceedings, and had a protective order that was largely applicable to her. In April of 2024, there was another running at large incident relative just to Trixie. There was a complaint issued at that time. At that time, there was kind of a revisiting of the terms of the protective order and the repercussions for a repeat offense seemed a bit incongruent with what was reasonable for trying to keep the animal contained. So there was a decision to modify the protective order with some amended conditions. And that modified protective order was what was in our folder there. That largely had to do with some redundancy in the fences, verifying that Trixie would receive some training. And at the time, for agreeing to those modifications, the select board also agreed to waive any financial penalties at that time. And so now that kind of brings us to present. We have another running at large situation. There's a second dog, Ringo, who was added to the mix or ownership somewhere between the last time and now. So part of the reason we have to kind of bring up the vicious dog one is because that's the vicious dog finding is because that still kind of applies to Trixie, but not to Ringo at this time. So is that clear? Does that clarify things?
So let me ask, April 23rd, 2024, there was a complaint against Trixie. Trixie was observed running without restraint. And we did not issue a citation.
That's correct.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so was it within a year that this next running?
That second running at large, it was right on the cusp. And there was a fair amount of dialogue around whether or not issuing a citation.
It was 2 days before, okay.
Yeah, was prudent relative to the status of a repeat offense in the future if there were to be one. And so there's also that kind of layer of calculus that I think you're right to note.
Right, and here we are almost exactly a year, again, within a few days.
Okay.
So I think the first order of business is kind of coalescing about, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I did have a question. Did we receive confirmation of the training?
Yes,
That's the voted item?
in fact, I think all of the remedial actions we judged her to comply with.
And the
Correct.
recommendation around the electronic containment system was only a recommendation?
You're correct, and Buffy can speak to this, but Buffy didn't think that would be particularly effective.
Uh-huh.
I think the dogs are long-haired enough that it might cause a problem that it wouldn't connect correctly.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
And the topography of the property, I think, really made
Yeah.
executing something pretty,
Totally.
pretty
Just
challenging. So,
clarifying.
yeah.
Thank you.
So unless there's any other clarifications, I think the next order of business is to kind of get some agreement on what we feel the facts are. And then have some dialogue around what we think are prudent actions taken after that. And then I guess the recommendation would be to, at the end of that, probably delegate, any actions, and the forming of formal findings to, Kari or myself, and then we can ratify them, in the next meeting.
Okay.
That'll take us off of the hook for getting too much of the language sorted out.
Yeah,
in
and
this meeting.
if I can, I think the two key questions are. What should come out of this violation of the protective order that Trixie was found to be running again? If you agree, if that's your finding, what should be the remedial action as a result of that? And then secondarily, both dogs were running at large again, and so that is a violation of the nuisance portion of the ordinance and would typically carry a modest fine. And last time you chose to waive it, you may not chose to do it.
And then I think, yeah, we'd have to have some dialogue around, the interpretation on where we are offense wise, whether it's a first or second offense. And whether that applies to the ordinance isn't clear on whether or not a violation of the nuisance section, it seems to be more directed towards the owner as the instance of an event, as opposed to the dogs, but in other parts of the section, it's relative to the instances of a dog, when it relates to licensing and that sort of thing. So I don't know if there's a right answer, but
We have to decide.
we kind of have to decide. So regarding the facts, from my perspective, it looks like that this is a violation of the amended protective order. With Trixie running at large.
Yeah.
That is a instance of a violation of both that and the ordinance, section 4 of the ordinance with a dog running at large.
Right.
Does that seem like pretty sound? And from that, well, so I think the other thing is the finding that Ringo was also running at large, and that is a violation of section 4, the nuisance section of the dog ordinance as well.
So just for the nuisance section, it would be sort of a first offense for Ringo and a second for.
So that part goes with the owner, not with the dog. I
Yeah.
think the protective
Right,
order
okay,
is
that's
focused
right.
on the dog.
So it would be second offense of the nuisance.
Unless you, look at the ordinance again, unless you thought that waiving it last time,
Made it not a first offense.
Yeah,
Yeah, because you waived it last time, and so it's a first offense.
Well, but
And
does
then-
waiving,
And 12 months.
we waived the penalty, we
Yes.
didn't waive the incident.
correct, that seems reasonable.
I would think.
Hold on, let me see.
Buffy, I know we provided a written,
So I kind of agree with Jamie on that. It was definitely the fact that we did waive the fee. We did not waive the fact that the dog was running at large.
it's a violation.
Yes.
Yeah. That
Is
is,
it Ringo though, or Trixie?
It is Trixie.
So Ringo is fresh.
But it's the
owner.
owner.
So
But it's
I think the last one, if I recall correctly, was Ringo, not Trixie. We have I think there's
So
a
you might be
video.
right.
I think there's a video that had Ringo, because remember that's when me and Jamie first went out. Oh, and we were talking about the
Yeah.
difference between the brown patch on the dog and being pure white.
Right, and I think that was part of the logic in waiving the fee, was it was not Trixie.
It was Ringo. Yes.
I think you're right.
Okay, So there was an incident within 12 months ago in which the one dog. One dog was, but it doesn't matter, was running at large. So this would be the second.
Yes.
Under
Uh,
the nuisance
Under the nuisance.
provision of the dog ordinance.
Yeah.
I think that's correct.
So then I think that brings us to kind of deciding what we would like to do as far as writing a citation and levying a penalty. And I'd say that puts us in the territory of calling this a second offense and issuing a citation. So that we are not in such ambiguous territory next time. We don't seem to be trending in the right direction. Does that sound about right?
And according to the ordinance, the second offense nuisance penalty is $75 or a $50 waiver.
What's the waiver mean?
It basically means
If
I'm
they
not
don't
gonna
contest-
contest.
So
it.
my understanding of the waiver is if you do not contest, that's what you're paying.
Yeah,
If you show up in court,
otherwise it
expected
goes
to argue
to,
it
yeah.
and make.
In actual court of the judicial bureau?
Yeah.
Right. All right, thank you.
And, okay, so that would then leave us with instruction from, or for Buffy to issue a citation. Is that seem fairly clear, Buffy, and is that something that seems, prudent to you?
Definitely. I think that's the way we should go.
Okay. So then the second bit of discussion is the revisiting of the protective order and some dialogue around whether or not we would like to entertain or open up modification of the protective order as it was modified in June 2023, or I'm sorry, 2024, April 2024. And I think a lot of that is still fairly applicable. And it sounds like Elsa is pursuing some of those escalated or exploring the potential implementation of some of those additional measures. One of which being a fence or kenneled area for the dogs to be in that doesn't have any gates, which at this point in both instances, it seems to be some kind of carelessness around the use of the gates or the latching of the gates, and there's not a lot that you can do to improve the latching of gates other than making them automatic, which is about where they are right now. So I don't know if we want to put some language in there that says we want to, see what a formal quote would look like for that kenneled space and in a certain period of time before taking up any further modification of the protective order.
I just offered the other point made in her statement is about tie-out cables
Mhm.
within the already fenced space, which I appreciate.
Mhm.
So, Buffy, can we ask Buffy, was there any, conversation between you and Elsa regarding these potential future, improvements?
Honestly, she took that upon herself. We have discussed that from the last time, but she took it upon herself to go buy the cable. And definitely took it upon herself to see if she could get something to alleviate the gate.
Okay.
So maybe we write a modification to the protective order. suggesting that the dogs be on a tie inside the existing fence at all times when they're outside until such a time a gateless enclosure is constructed.
Right, wouldn't
Yeah.
that have to be for Trixie, not for him?
Yeah, I think so.
Yes,
Okay,
technically, yes.
We're not allowed to require both because they're not both characterized in the previous, yeah.
I mean, if we didn't wanna go that far, we could, have a correspondence with her and ask her, as Jordan was, I think, suggesting, to communicate with us about what the fenced-in area would cost and when that can happen, and then do a protective border amendment. If we didn't wanna do it immediately.
What would be the purpose of us knowing the cost? I don't see that as
Well,
relevant.
yeah, good point. We wanna know.
I'm seriously.
I think just,
I don't-
I think just demonstration that, that the option has been
Fully
explored, you
explored.
know,
Uh-huh.
and,
Thank you.
yeah, I think it's kind of a moot point if we determine that it needs to be done. But I think demonstration that it's a step that has a level of investigation that has been completed and is prepared. Yeah, it's a plan, yeah. She had mentioned that she would, you know, apply for permitting, though I don't think that that would necessarily be applicable, though I think she might technically be in the historic district, so that might be why that would be triggered, but if it's behind the house, I think that there'd be a fair amount of exception to that. Anyway, so I think it's fairly straightforward to modify the protective order and add the condition of the cabling or the tie. We can try to ask for both being on ties, at first, and if that seems hard to enforce, then we can walk it back, but I'd say that it makes sense to probably try to keep both contained.
I thought she registered them as, farm dogs this year.
She did, but, the nuisance section of the.
Right, no, I understand that part, but I meant for Ringo,
So, yeah,
to see where I was going with that.
yeah,
Does that make it?
Cause Ringo is allowed as long as he stays on his property. Because of how he's registered, because we registered him as a working farm dog. He's a little different than she is because she's on the protective order.
So, a working farm dog is allowed to run free on its own property.
Correct.
on its own property, and it's also able to be off property and not be considered at large as long as it is engaged in herding
Chickens.
chickens or livestock, yeah, which includes chickens.
And it's allowed to bark longer than
Right.
Correct.
Though it does say in the ordinance, at least, that that barking also needs to be associated with the act of herding. So it can't just be kind of herding or protecting. So it needs to be kind of engaged in that activity. So if it's
Okay.
not in the proximity of the animals, then it doesn't really count. So, so I guess, Buffy, what you're kind of getting at is whether or not the tying, then.
I would also be
negates
worried that if you tied two of them in the same fence, they would
Yeah.
get entangled in each other and either break their
Yeah.
ties.
Yep,
I would think we'd be setting that up to fail is all I was thinking.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you.
May I ask another question? The gates that are currently, are those gates intended to latch themselves? They're supposed to swing shut on their own?
That
Correct.
was the.
So what I'm hearing, if I understand this correctly, that did not happen,
Right.
right?
Right.
So is there something that we need to discuss around the proper functioning of those self-closing gates as well? If they're not self-closing?
Had not fully aligned the gate and locked it.
Well, I'm wondering if the gentleman that was working on the septic didn't let it self-close because he didn't want to shut the gate because it wasn't his gate to shut, and that there was a teenager involved. I really don't think it was a gate issue. I really just think it was
Okay, so it wasn't the functioning of the gate that's the issue.
correct.
Okay.
Though I guess, depending on Buffy's availability, we could ask Buffy to go over and inspect the
I could
condition
definitely.
of the fences and the
Mhm.
status of them being locking versus self-locking, and we could
I can definitely
modify
do
the
that.
protective order if need be, relative to Buffy's findings there, to upgrade them to some sort of self-latching function, as well as tying of Trixie, because at least one of the animals is tied and the other has a better chance of staying contained. Yes, ma'am.
Question, so I understand that the working farm dog registration allows for other behavior than if it was not a farm dog. But that statute or that behavior, I would think doesn't apply if there's been a vicious dog protective order against the same farm dog. So it seems like a protective order would supersede a farm dog.
I would think so, that I think, but again, that would only apply to Trixie anyway, as being potentially vicious. She wasn't originally found to be vicious. She was designated as potentially vicious, but I would agree. I can't, other than saying I personally think that logic holds water. I don't know if legally it does. We'd have to probably investigate that a little bit more with the town attorney and do a little more deeper digging. But that being said, I mean, I think that the farm dog designation is also pretty specific to the activity of herding or protecting livestock, and so or crops, and so it doesn't just mean that because there's a designation of farm dog that the dog can continue to bark. Like, they're still subjected to, you know, management that is not a nuisance. It just adds a little extra layer. Yep.
I think last time we waived the fee because we knew she was going to be investing a good chunk of change
In the
into the
training.
other things.
Yeah.
Just wanted to point that out to the new folks so that you knew we knew she was gonna put money into training and money in infrastructure, and so that was why we waived, one of the reasons.
And that the fence was paid, or not requiring that the fence was
No.
paid.
Right.
Yeah, there's a lot of dialogue around the fence. One, it was not the root cause of the animal, and same in this situation,
It's
like
the
the height
gates.
of the fence, and then, you know, having extra expense paid to heighten the fence all the way around the property was seemed unnecessary and hard to maintain through various
They're
seasons.
not jumping over.
They're not jumping over unless there's damage to the fence. It's really maintaining of the fences and the gates that's the primary issue. Okay, well,
Can I run through what I've got written
Yes,
down, the
please.
findings? So, Trixie was found to be running at large, which is a violation of the modified protective order. The protective order will be modified again such that when outdoors, Trixie will be connected to cable restraint within the existing fencing until a gateless enclosure is installed.
Well, I just, whenever the dog's in that
Oh, okay.
gated space.
I heard Jamie say something along those lines, but
Okay,
are we expecting that it'll be forever?
I was just thinking that if she follows through with her proposed idea and creates a separate gateless enclosure,
yes.
we would no longer require
We wouldn't require
the tie.
In that space,
In
in
that
that space, but,
Within that space specifically. okay.
but, yeah,
Right.
I was just trying to make the
Yes.
distinction between the two spaces.
Good,
Thank
good. The animal control officer will inspect the site to verify compliance with all remedial actions. And both dogs were found to be running at large with a violation of the nuisance portion of the ordinance, which is a second offense. With a 12-month period, this carries a $75 penalty, $50 waiver, which the ACO will write a citation for.
Yes.
Sounds
Yes,
like
Barbara?
there's-
So regarding Trixie being, tied within the fence area, just a reminder that in the very first vicious dog hearing, Elsa said that, one of the reasons they get out sometimes is because of fence damage. When trees fall or heavy branches fall. So if the dog is required to be tied until a new gate is installed, that doesn't keep the dog from getting out. If there's fence damage back in the back of the yard, she hasn't noticed that the dog gets out that way.
Yeah, I think at that time, I'm envisioning a gateless fence being
Smaller.
a chain link, smaller kennel style fence and not, a
The whole
tall
property.
turkey wire fence, which is, I think, largely what the fence is now, across the back portion. So I think at that time, we would have to consider the robustness of the fence enclosure.
So again, that would be why you would request some kind of estimate or whatever,
Yeah.
design and
Right.
estimate, yeah, thank you.
Well, it seems to me like with this order, she has the choice. She can install something like that and not use the cable restraint all the time. Or if it's too expensive, she just using cable restraint.
I think that's the intent.
Yeah. Do we want something in there that we would like to view and approve the design of a new enclosure?
I think, what would be most appropriate would be to set a date certain that we'd expect to have, a quote. From a service provider on an enclosure that specifies the style and size.
Or you can leave that all in her court and specify that if and when she installs this gateless
Right.
thing, that Buffy will inspect that as well.
That would
And
work.
yeah, I think in the interim, though, we need to, at least inspect that the latches are adequate.
Yes.
Yes,
And then
Yeah.
also, require, Trixie to be tied, plus one of them to be, tied, in the current enclosed environment. And then we would be requiring a quote in whatever Bucky thinks is reasonable, 2 months time.
Well, I liked Kari's suggestion that we just make it a choice.
Okay.
That she can keep.
You can either keep them hitched.
Right.
Right.
I'm just trying to foresee if there is another incident and then we want to make the requirement to install a fence in a certain period of time.
What if we left it as the cable and for not that any of her herself included wants another offense, but if they were to get out at that point, we would deem that it was required for her to have that fence to keep the dog.
Sure.
without boundment.
Sure.
Yeah, the whole matter of what next, next time, I know.
Right.
Well, no, more kind of, well, my thought is, I mean, maybe she can't, it's not, she's talking about restructuring her house to make a door out into a play garden without
Right.
having a fence into it. So that could be $500 for a door. It could be $1,500 to hire somebody. It could be a lot more money than she can afford right now because I mean,
Yeah.
so that's what I was thinking. So if, definitely this time, yes, the cable tie out, and until you build that fence, Trixie must be on the tie out when outside. And if there are further issues, that's the remedy. Is 100% at that point that you need to have something to keep Trixie home.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, it sounds like we're on the same page then on that. Doug, I don't think it would be appropriate to take comments from the public at this time on the matter. I'd like to actually entertain a motion to authorize Ari and myself to draft these findings and send them to Elsa to be ratified at our next meeting.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Buffy, and
Yeah,
Barbara
thanks,
for the
Buffy.
contributions. And with that, I would like to close the hearing and move on to our regular agenda.
All right, thank you
good.
guys. I'm gonna hop off.
Thanks.
Thanks, Buffy.
Bye.
Try to play a little catch up here if we can. The administrative items on the agenda. So we have call for any additions or changes to the agenda. It's a pretty simple one tonight, so hopefully we can kind of stick to that. Does anybody need to modify those or make any adjustments? All right, and then we have the approval of the minutes. We have the tabled minutes from March 24th, which needed to be updated to include dialogue with Paul Olander, which have now been added and posted as draft minutes, and then also the April 14th minutes, both of which are posted to the shared drive. Has everybody had the opportunity to review those?
Yeah.
Shayna, thank you. Those are looking great. It's kind of trial by fire here. Would anybody like
I have
to?
a
Yeah,
friendly
go ahead.
amendment.
Please.
Shayna, my last name does not have an S.
Okay.
And,
There was
okay,
another name issue.
Christine Badalenti Smith, her name was not spelled correctly in the appointments section. Okay.
In the April 14th.
Yeah.
Okay. Do we have the correct spelling of those?
We'll get it.
Okay. So with those modifications, could I get a motion to approve the minutes?
You want to approve them both together?
Yes, please.
Those two meetings.
Second.
As modified.
All in favor? All right, aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Board orders posted to the shared drive. Hopefully everybody's had the opportunity to review. Does anybody have any questions or dialogue around the board orders?
I do have a question.
Yes.
About the new truck.
Hmm.
Fact that it's gonna be a year late. Does the warranty start on that truck when we pick it up? Or is it the clock running right now?
It's a good question.
Because the clock's running right now, I tell them to keep their truck and get another one. I mean, that's a big loss of money if something happens.
Yeah, the challenge with backing out of this is we have a financing agreement with another party.
Yeah,
And I'm not sure, I mean, I asked if we can get out of that.
yeah.
I got a firm no, but I didn't like,
With the
Scrutinize
financing
the contract.
agreement?
with the financing
Which
company,
can't we get out of?
the financing agreement.
Wow. If we don't have.
But maybe I should push harder. But the warranty is that's a good question, I don't know.
Maybe we'll find out.
Yeah, I'll definitely find out.
Is it just for that, is it relative to that truck, or would there be an opportunity to cancel the order with the manufacturer, place a new order with the same financing? I mean, the paperwork specifies
The new vehicle, but,
Different vehicle.
a different vehicle.
I mean,
I don't
it
know.
sounds like we're not gonna find one that doesn't have a year wait.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
I
that's
think
the
all of
problem,
them.
the trucks are more available apparently than chassis. So,
Yeah, it's the chassis that's taken such a long time.
Yeah. Definitely find out.
Okay. Thank you.
Maybe a firm letter from our lawyer saying that we want the title or the warranty to kick in. Is the warranty just the manufacturer's standard warranty, or is that?
Yeah,
Does anybody have any modifications or changes to the board orders relative to that? Can I get an entertain to approve the board orders and sign them as
So moved.
posted?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Approving and signing of the dog warrant.
hopefully everybody saw the modified version.
So, yeah.
That got sent out today.
Has everybody had the opportunity to read that? This is the first notice or the second notice of outstanding.
Oh, it's multiple
Multiple
notices. This is the only action taken, the first action taken by the select board.
Gotcha, which we had to do last year, and did bring folks into compliance. It was pretty successful, so it's a stern warning from the select board that they are past due in registering their dogs.
My apologies for the language, it's from the statute, it's what you gotta use, so.
Yeah.
It is what it is.
So the language in this warrant is required by the.
It's 20 VSA 35, whatever it is straight out of the
Must have
warrant
been
statute.
adopted in 1912.
Yeah.
All right, so, can I ask what the effect of it is? Does Buffy then have to go and pound all these animals?
No,
Okay,
do you want me to answer this question?
Yes, please.
It just says that because you are late, we have the right to impound or destroy your animal because you haven't registered yet. In our town, we have our special dog ordinance. We can charge you an extra $100 because you haven't registered your dogs yet. Please get it done.
right, but that's the letter to the owner of the animal.
Yeah.
But the order, the charge to Buffy is hereof fail not. So you have to, what? You have to impound the animal?
No town follows it that way.
Okay.
There's no.
You saw the letter as well.
Well, the letter is to the owner.
Right.
That's different from ordering Buffy to impound the animals.
Which we wouldn't use it unless we all came
So-
back together again.
Okay, so the warrant doesn't go out until
No.
we decide.
Right.
That answers the question. Thank you.
And there's no deadline on when you need to do the warrant.
All right, so the warrant is just to look at tonight.
So you have found using this approach generates more compliance.
We did this
Significantly more.
letter last year for the first time since I've been working at the town office, and these people have gotten multiple notifications. It did the trick. That letter did the trick. Everybody was registered within 30 days.
Okay.
I think we only had one person who had to pay $100 last year. Barbara, do you remember?
Who never did register?
No, that's someone who had to pay the $100.
Oh, I don't remember.
It was either one or nobody. Everybody took care of it would have, or at least like talk with somebody, made a plan that we felt comfortable with.
Mhm.
But it's expensive to start sending out certified letters, and so the $100, we get $100, that usually covers the fees for it.
These letters would not be certified though, the reminder letters.
They didn't go out certified.
No, but eventually we get to certified,
Yes,
when we're
understood.
still struggling to contact.
Right, okay, thank you.
So if I'm understanding the action correctly, then we are approving a delinquent letter to be distributed. And then we will be aware of the warrant, but not sign it this evening. Is that?
That's up to you. You can sign the warrant tonight, you can save it for 6 weeks from now. You can do it later.
Does anybody have an opinion? Sounds like there's a little hesitation over the urgency of the language, and I think that that's fair.
Yeah.
So I don't think we need to sign the warrant as long as we're all aware
So
that
that's
that
a
is.
modification
Yep.
of the,
That's great.
the
Yep.
Let's approve the letter.
action.
One more
Happy with
comment, just plenty of towns have over 100 dogs on this list at this point, so they really do need to crack down sooner rather than later. We have a handful of households, it's not a huge concern, and none of them have had, that I can recognize, have had any issues lately with their dog, so that's why I don't see anything too rushed, so I think waiting on the warrant is not a bad idea.
Is warranted. Okay, can I, and it's an authorization for, is that for Akari to sign those or is? for-
Yeah. Yeah, they're all set up, please. You're talking about the hazard mitigation grant?
No, I'm sorry, I'm mixing the memo.
Oh, this is the letter. the
dog
dog
letter.
letter?
Yeah.
Not a letter, it's signed by Buffy, or it's written to be signed by.
So we
Buffy.
just authorize the office staff to
Mhm.
prepare. and
Generate the
send
letters.
letter.
All
I
right,
move to approve the letter to be sent.
Second,
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. On any opposed? Thank you, and thank you, Tegan, for doing some homework. Yes, Doug?
How can you tell me I can't comment on this?
You can.
Wait a minute, you shut me down.
No, just in the hearing, Doug. So this is a different dog related matter, but if you'd like to speak
I think you're
to
backing up.
what? Okay.
Huh?
That's fair. I like
You
it.
start talking about people's dogs.
Yeah,
You must be talking about the wives, because their dogs are very important to them. Right? Oh, yeah, I tell dog people all the time. I don't, and you talk about the fence, you can buy an electric fence. Electronic, carry right in your hand, and you can control the whole area. The dog can't get through there. For probably $500. And you're talking about locking the fence and locking this, you don't need all that crap. We got, I got calls that'll tell me how far away that dog is, how many miles he traveled, he'll tell me everything about that damn dog. You know,
I do. I've used those. I am aware of them. I am.
Yeah.
And it's a valid point.
well, I don't think you shut me down.
I wasn't trying to shut you down. I just didn't, it wouldn't have been appropriate to take those comments during the hearing. Because that was just a
That
very
would
formal,
be a
but
good thing for you to analyze and say, well, maybe he ought to get a fence instead of buy a fence and make sure the door's locked and all this crap. Electronic, it's there, right?
yeah,
Huh?
I appreciate the feedback and I think that will
That's
be
not
on
your
the,
problem. You know where that dog is. And me mowing so much land, I got dogs running all over my place.
I hear you, Doug, but, and again, I'm not trying to shut you down. It's a valid point
Well, we
and we'll
spent
keep
almost
it.
45 minutes on this damn dog.
I understand. I understand. So I'd like to move on with the authorization of Kari for the hazard mitigation grant application form. Which is the federal form that was circulated by Kari. And is the hazard mitigation grant that we've been talking, this one's for the Kent.
No, this is
Or
for
for Bliss
Moscow
Pond.
Woods Bridge replacement and the removal of the dam. So this is a big one, and
Yeah.
it would be 100% funded if we were to be awarded.
And we think FEMA hasn't canceled this whole thing?
So far, and one of the interesting things about this process is we've partnered with the Friends of the
Friends of the
Winooski.
Yeah.
They've actually done a lot of the work on this.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And we have been meeting regularly with the state people from the hazard mitigation, or, you know, hazard folks from the state, and they've been sort of nursing this along, like they have helped us with, you know, this application. They think we're in good shape. I guess, you know, no one really knows
Yeah.
if
Okay.
this is gonna be awarded or not, but it's such an important project for the town.
Yeah.
And if we were to receive 100% funding, it would be amazing.
yeah, I indirectly met with Friends of Winooski on another project outside of town stuff and just kind of pick their brain a little bit. And it's gonna be competitive. There are a lot of other projects, but it certainly seems like this is a great opportunity to kind of roll the Moscow Woods Bridge project into this bigger project
Yeah.
that could potentially make it 100% funded, if it does get funded. So it's kind of a opportunity we can't afford to miss, and whether or not it comes through or not
Yeah.
is another question altogether.
I move that we authorize Carly to sign the hazard mitigation grant application form.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you, Kari. So we've got an allocation for public comment for anything that is currently not on the agenda. Is there any public comment?
Yeah, I got a few.
Sure. Are they comments on issues that aren't on the agenda? Okay,
So I'm back to the spring down there.
okay.
And have you found anybody yet that knows anything about the spring?
Nobody has mentioned the spring to me, other than
You
you.
ask. Have you asked anybody?
I have not asked anybody.
Okay. Hey, Kurt, have you asked anybody?
I spoke with the owner, the landowner.
And what did he tell you?
He said that people are welcome to use the spring. We've talked about this before.
Okay, we're gonna talk about it again. Okay. I got pictures of that spring working. Anybody wanna see them? Water coming out of a full pipe. Been there for 150 years probably or more. Okay, it has. I know where there's 5 springs. Woodbury, go, this spring here. Danville, there's a spring. Bath, New Hampshire, there's a spring right side of the road on 302. If people I see people get water there. There's those kind of springs like, you know, I mean, and you may not think it's very important, but I do. Because if you run out of power, you're gonna have no water. Your teaching well's not gonna work. You can come down to this spring right down here and get water. Get water if we just put them in.
So Doug, here's what I'd like to say.
You don't wanna hear that, do you?
No, it's
What?
my responsibility and the responsibility of the board to address concerns of the community. Right now, you're the only one who's representing concerns about this particular thing. So certainly a petition.
Everybody I talk to in this town does not like everybody in this town from Maple Corner.
Listen, Doug, I don't.
Don't shut me down just because you're on the board. We know about this. We know about how you got here. We know about how you got on this board. Everybody on this board is from Maple Corner. We don't need everybody from Maple Corner.
Well, 3 people are from Maple Corner.
Well, wait a minute, she's got a house on the pond, so you might as well say she's from Maple Corner.
I don't, so Doug, I'm not trying to
Yes, you are.
say that this isn't something that the board won't take up. I'm just saying that it is our responsibility to take care and conduct business relative to the agendas that we have, and doing that in an open meeting. And so if this is an issue that you feel strongly about, and I said this the last time, that I would encourage you to work with the property owner, if the property owner could get.
But he don't own it, and if you don't know, you got two people that work for you and you, that know all about that spring.
But we cannot,
You know all about that
Charge.
spring.
Doug, we're good,
Raul
are there,
knows all
Doug,
about that spring.
Doug, are there other issues that you want to speak to, other than this?
Yeah, grading my road, took a foot off my lawn between the road and the trees. A foot, okay?
Last week,
My property, well, you know how that goes. And who the hell graded Jack Hill? Who did that? Do you know?
I don't know.
Wait a minute, are you the town manager and you don't know?
The road crew is,
Don't, wait a minute, you should know.
is
who did that
there,
road.
is there a specific concern about?
Oh, yeah, go look at it, go look at it.
Okay.
That is the nastiest job I've ever seen. It's wider, the road was dirt up, go look at it. Okay, my road. Tomorrow, we are meeting in the town garage, right, at 1 o'clock.
I'll be there.
I will too, you better bet your dollar I'll be there, buddy.
Doug, there are other members of the community, it looks like they want to speak to something. Sage, do you have a separate
Yeah,
issue?
two
Or
things, actually, good or bad news relating to what Doug is saying.
Mhm.
Where is the spring? Is it the one on Pekin Brook Road that they made a different thing and now we've got tires dumped there again?
One more time. Huh?
Okay, and the other thing is I do have to say Jack Hill Road was assaulted. And there's a lot taken out and the sod is like this high.
Thank you.
And it's got really close to fencing, agricultural fencing, and every year it happens, and I try to be chill. But there's
Okay.
no reason to widen that up like that. When the sod actually holds to the earth and doesn't erode, when you keep that sod there, don't cut it. Right, when you cut into that, then it's just all gonna silt down, so I have to agree, it was harsh. That's not why I came to the meeting, but it was really harsh, I did wanna cry a little bit.
Well, I've been up that road and a lot of people are really, really pissed about that road. Really, that road. Really mad. You're gonna hear a lot about it.
Okay.
Okay, now, who cut those trees down on Bliss Pond Road? Who cut those big pines? You know who did
The
that?
road crew did. They were asked by,
Who?
not the landowner, the gentleman who lived next door, because he was concerned about his children waiting at the bus stop there. So we did talk to the Blatchleys. They
Okay,
gave permission to remove them.
good, thank you.
Okay.
What about my road? You're gonna widen that road out there? You killed 2 trees, but we cut them down, we got 1 more. I don't like that. You know, we tried to do a hell of a job on this lawn. We
Well,
do.
I'll come,
And
Those are-
you
those are-
guys, huh? You wanna
come
come
take a look at it.
tomorrow,
Maybe,
huh?
maybe tomorrow,
Yeah, we'll go out, Tucker Road too.
maybe.
Show you that. And somebody made that corner super wide.
Doug, we're running short on time.
Dog,
That was on the agenda. It's a 15-minute time period for things that are not on the agenda so that we can have. I understand, Doug. I hear you. This time is intended for public comment to add things to future agendas so that we can have the opportunity to organize around adding them
Last
to
time
the
I
agenda.
came to reality, he said I was rude. What the hell is he telling everybody? I'm rude? 'Cause everybody knows.
Doug, you're encroaching on that now, again.
Okay, throw it.
Great. I'm not throwing you out, but we are gonna move on with the agenda.
Okay, I want you to throw me.
I'm not gonna throw you anywhere, Doug.
Throw me out of here. I don't want you to do bad. Uh,
I won't feel bad.
huh?
All right, we're moving on, or Sage, you're here to talk about other things that are on the agenda?
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
I'm pushed for now.
Thanks, I appreciate it. So the spring check-in with the cemetery commission. Could we just, no, there's no particular agenda here. We just wanted to check in, though it did sound like there's some specific consideration around modifying the ordinance to include some language around the use of metal detectors. Is that right? Do either of you want to speak to what's going on and what you need?
Read online, and you know everything you read online is true. That there had been issues in other places with people using metal detectors in cemeteries, and I just thought, let's head that off before we have an issue. It's just wrong.
Yeah, we did change the cemetery rules. And if you look in the section of the rules, conduct of persons in cemeteries, there is a new one that says nobody will use a metal detector in a cemetery unless the cemetery commission has given them approval. We don't want people running around finding things, digging them up without knowing what's going on. We've never had a problem, at least, well, I say never, I've only been here, I've only lived in town for 41 years, so what's the name? Well, we thought that would be a good thing to do, is to say, don't use it if you want, if you got a legitimate reason to try to find some old marker somewhere, let us know, we'll talk about it. So somebody, I think Bill Davis, when I talked with him, and that guy, said, if you put a rule in, maybe there ought to be an ordinance to back it up, so there'd be some teeth to it. I don't know if there's ever gonna be a problem, there's a town law to pass an ordinance and say you can't use metal detector in cemeteries, or just putting it in the rules sufficient.
My thought is, you got somebody from out of town who comes in, but they're not gonna read our rules. You need a sign.
People in town probably don't read the rules. That was Bill's suggestion, and I thought, okay, let's bring it up. Does the board think this is something that should be a town ordinance or not?
I'm trying to think if there are any existing ordinances
That would cover
that would
this.
cover it, or would be an appropriate place to put a line in. But I can't think of one.
I can't either.
No.
No, I was just going through the website too,
Yeah.
so it seems to me like it would be difficult to stand up an ordinance for that express purpose. But I think it's interesting to think about having rules posted at the cemeteries, but it's gonna be, there's gonna be too many of them. And it's gonna be an eyesore, I'm sure.
But are you saying that you already have that as part of your language of the?
As of a couple of days ago, it was published. If you look at the
Great.
rules on the website,
So, and it's on the website.
it's on the website.
And that, was the commission satisfied with that?
Yeah, we voted on it. We warned it, we discussed it, and we made the change.
Great.
The other thing about it would be, if it should suddenly become an issue, then the next step would be maybe to just put signs on all of the cemetery entrances and stuff, say, no metal detectors. But, you know, it may be a solution looking for a problem.
I would be satisfied with the fact that you've already put it in the rules, I
Yeah.
think would be satisfactory for the circumstance, given that it's not yet become an issue and signage would be,
If it becomes an issue, then we can talk about it.
yeah, and signage I think would be quite challenging.
Mhm.
And if we do in the future go that route, we might look at other cemetery rules that would be appropriate, be in an ordinance, rather than it just be that one super specific thing. You know, if we were gonna have a cemetery.
I would think that it would be
ordinance,
kind of like the
would be broader.
stewardship or use of town property or something like that, that would also, you know, kind of
Yeah.
cover the town forest properties.
Right,
Like, just kind of a rules of conduct or something to that extent. That could make sense. So, you know, I think we can certainly, now that we have an ordinance advisory committee, we can put that on there for kind of as a placeholder, should there be something that makes it an urgent matter, we can try to organize some resources around it. I know there's kind of a full docket right now, for the ordinance advisory committee, just with existing ordinances, but we can kind of earmark it for consideration, for sure.
I thought about calling some other cemetery commissions and say, have you run into this problem? What are you doing about it?
So, yeah, I guess that to the extent beyond the language that you already have, if you do receive any of that, any feedback that seems worth noting and keeping around, pass it along to Kari or Barbara or just the select board, and we can put it in the resource folder for ordinance advisory, and at least we can start compiling some of that stuff so that we can stay organized around it.
It's easy to walk across the road and bang on Barrett's door.
Yeah.
She won't always hear
Great. Well, are there any other issues or things on the docket for the year worth getting into now?
I think we're pretty well set. I think financially, we're in reasonably good shape. We may be running a small deficit this year, but it isn't serious. I did talk to our sexton, Carrie, about cutting down that spruce tree.
Oh, okay,
It's $150 to cut it down and get it out of there, so I'm just gonna tell him to do it.
that makes sense.
But he didn't come to our last meeting, so I wrote to him and I said, in lieu of that, the best we can do is $149.95. No, but we should be in pretty good shape, so.
Well, thank you very much. And
Are you
thanks.
doing any painting, fence painting this year?
Yes, I'm convinced, I think that's in the minutes of the recent meeting, that the U32 football squad has said they will come and do it again.
Great.
So we're gonna prime the Old West Church fence, which is a much more complicated fence than the Robinson Cemetery, and let it sit for a while and then put finish coat on it. But that won't happen until at least July, because it's all in next year's budget.
Okay.
Fiscal year's budget.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great collaboration.
Yeah.
I'll fix out again.
Well, thank you for coming and the contributions. Appreciate it.
I want to commend the commission, is doing a good job, stewarding the resources. I received a payment for burial plot purchase, and I love processing those things because they go straight into the investment fund. Which hasn't been doing that well lately, but that's just seed money to grow for the
Yeah.
future.
Long view,
Yeah.
the long view, right?
I think as part of my job as the chair, percentage that should go in the money.
I didn't see that.
Sorry, we're rolling tapes.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks for all you're doing. Yeah, I appreciate it.
So next up, we have the kind of culmination of the town plan and town regulation adoption. So at this point, we are coming to the end of needing to adopt things. Hearings have been had, feedback has been received. Jared has been tarred and at least feathered, and has agreed to go through it again. So I don't know that this really needs much discussion. Is anybody feeling like there needs to be any further dialogue? Have there been any further pieces of feedback to the planning commission on either of these policies?
Yesterday, and nothing new has come in. I've got everything posted, all public comment, all drafts, the land use regulations, the change, the sort of executive summary of the changes, it's all there. It's all put up, so we're ready to just go. I actually heard from CVRPC today.
Oh, good.
They do hope in the middle of May to have comment back
Okay.
already, so.
And
And they're on it, they even know, I mean, she even said, I know this is what we're doing, and that you hope to have this, and so that you're getting, like, they are fully aware of it too, so I think we're on track.
Jared, the comments that were received in our meeting last time from Mr. Bravians, are they posted somewhere at this point?
I don't know if we included them in the document,
Okay.
but we can. We have them,
And they're all in the same recording.
and they're all in the Zoom recording too, but yeah, we have his written comments as well that I can
They should
put
just
with
be
the
part of-
broader.
They should be easy to find. And
Yeah.
Let's make them in a state that's easy for.
I can absolutely do that, yeah.
Great.
So does anybody have any other questions? At this point, we are considering the adoption. And after the adoption, there's gonna be the seasoning period that we need to go through before they are fully in effect. And once we're there, we'll have a standing town plan again that has been pretty meaningfully updated. And then immediately revisited, but we'd also more importantly be ratifying essentially the town vote on the town regulations and putting them into good standing relative to the adoption of the new town plan. So we're doing both in parallel. Does that sound good? Is everybody ready to take a vote on those things?
Approve the plan first.
Let's definitely start with the plan.
I would make a motion to adopt the 2025 town plan.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, and any abstentions? It's okay. Possible action, we have the land use regulations as previously adopted by the town vote. And not modified. Were there any changes to that? There were not. I get a motion to approve the zoning regulations.
So moved.
Second,
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions. Very good. Next steps, Jared.
Yeah, congratulations, Jared.
So,
the term.
yeah, we made it to the first term, right? So yeah, we've got our meeting we have next week. And our plan is to come out of that with a structure for how we're going to go through public comment, the Conservation Commission, Natural Environment section, and then eventually CVRPC's comments. So we're gonna try to do that in a structured way. We know that CVRPC's comments, we're not just going to approve them wholesale, but they're most likely going to be things that are statutory, like it's gonna be, you have to have X. So that will be a much quicker process. But we're gonna try to come up with a plan for how to go through public comments, including John's. How to go through all of those, and then how we wanna go about natural environment, the Conservation Commissions, and then the CVRPC comments. And we're pretty confident of going through. I mean, we've already kind of started our plan with going through different sections over different meetings and looking at the public comment and just making the changes then as we go. We'll do it like we did this one. We'll then have what is this current version and then a new one where we make the changes and then be able to track as we go to see what we've made. But most of the comments are pretty clear. They're not gonna be really difficult for us to talk about. We did notice there is a lot of numbers to be done with the energy section. That was a place where all the numbers that came from CVRPC were not clean. It's like two people have wood chip, like we know it's more than that, like, we know it's not correct. So we are gonna do a survey and put out a survey out there and see if we can get better numbers for that. But that's one of the few less specific things we have other than just public comment and the Conservation Commission work. That's really gonna be the big, because it's a really big section, it's really detailed, it's really specific. And that's gonna take us some just really good time with us and Larry and right, and Conservation Commission to go through and make sure we've got it exactly the way we want it. It's just a really big, important section, and we gotta do that one right, so that's gonna take up a bulk of our time. But our next step is meeting next week to come up with I'll do it like we've done before with the calendar, this meeting, we'll talk about this and this and this, and just
Great.
plug through on each thing as we go.
So I'm wondering if, so I think for, May, we have an early meeting, right? So
May
there's-
12th is the one May meeting, and then there's June.
And then
2nd.
there's June 2nd, and since you're anticipating feedback from CVRPC, and I'm wondering if it makes sense just to kind of earmark another check-in, just to kind of review the calendar at that meeting. We'll put it on the agenda. Yeah, the June 2nd
That's
meeting.
perfect, yeah, that'd be perfect time to do that, yeah.
That'll give us a chance to kind of take a look at the calendar, get an idea, what you guys are looking at
We will
for.
definitely have that all by then, we will have our plan as
Perfect.
to what we're doing going forward, so.
Okay. Great.
Perfect.
Sounds good. Any other questions for Jared?
On the zoning regs, is there a wait period? I'm just trying to remember, do they like go into effect today when they're approved, or is there
So
a?
they go, very anecdotally, they, now that they're adopted, they're, anything that, any applications have to be viewed relative to both of them. And
Any existing applications?
not existing applications, any new ones that would be coming in, can be viewed under both, and if they are called into question, then, or challenged, I think it's whichever is more stringent, generally applies. If there's work to be considered moving forward, or that is going to be executed in that interim period. But the seasoning period, I know there's language in the order, or in the regs that kind of specifies how that's governed.
I can get specific for you.
Last time.
Yeah.
Just the recording or? did
No,
we
the whole
drop
Zoom
everything?
just stopped. Still have participants, by just waiting.
Interesting.
We lost you for about 5 minutes there.
Well,
Sorry,
about
Chris, that happened last time too, and we're not quite sure why it's automatically doing that, but, good to know it was only 5 minutes and Orca's still, right? You guys
See
probably
if it was on me last time.
dubbed that in, yeah.
So what did we
Um,
miss?
That's a good, what did you catch?
the town plan was adopted and zoning regulations.
We talked about accountability and.
Yeah. And the plan moving, so both the, updated town plan was adopted, as were the zoning regulations. And there is a commitment to, put the planning commission back on the agenda for, June 2nd, to check in on, the timeline for, adding the additional changes that we wanted to work through for the town plan. And I think that's about all of it. Yep, no
Thank you.
problem. So the next item on the agenda is long-term financial planning, which is a start of a conversation. We kind of alluded to it in previous meetings. Murray has prepared an overview of kind of an outline of how we kind of want to frame this dialogue, and what we're working towards is how do we want to work through these issues or prepare ourselves for these issues. And one of the things that we've kind of landed on was thinking about adding this as kind of a standing agenda item to a certain extent, at least monthly, in the coming months and toward the end of the year, so that we can start formulating a plan as we need to. There could be some pretty significant impacts to the town budget and resources. Should there be a pretty significant end to federal aid support going to the state and by virtue to us. So, all right, you want me to just kind of pass it over to you to kind of go through the.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't planning to go through it all, but just to give the top level for those who haven't seen the memo or weren't part of the last discussion. I think there's strong reason to be concerned about not just this next budget cycle, but the upcoming ones with everything that's going on. Some of that has to do with federal policy, but not all of it. In fact, the long-term trend with medical insurance, which was such a big factor in last year's budget, and with the education portion of our tax, those things aren't going to change. What really got me going was listening to the Green Mountain Care Board chair saying, don't expect anything less than 15-20% increase in medical insurance. And then I started noticing, oh, well, yeah, that's just one piece of this puzzle, but we operate with such limited resources already. What would happen? What would we do if we started to see all of these different factors coming together, including, loss of grants and in fact, our residents? That's what feels different to me this time, is that it's at sort of all levels of the system. When I say this time, I'm thinking of my experience with COVID and then with the Great Recession before that. Those were crises, but this feels different to me in that it's sort of pervasive throughout, and it's got both this policy, federal policy aspect, but it's also got these long-term trends. And anyway, my goal would be to, let's start preparing. And a lot of that is about how to have the right conversation. Who do we have it with and when, and how do we frame it? That's what this document is like. How do we get people sort of thinking along the same line so that we're prepared as we can be if we have to make really difficult choices. And that comes down to what are we going to prioritize and what's not going to be prioritized. Those are really hard conversations. I try not to be alarmist about this. I don't want people to panic or shut down or anything, but I do think it's helpful to prepare, even if the worst doesn't come to pass. It's still good to think about contingencies and.
I think it'll still allow for new ideas to come along, right? Opportunities for improvements, that,
Yeah.
those are good things.
Yeah.
So I guess for tonight, what I would hope is that, just hear how other people are thinking about this. This framing makes sense to you? What would you change or add? And then where do we go from here? How do we broaden the conversation? And we might not be ready to answer that, but we can start thinking about it anyway.
I just had a question. Are you thinking about this primarily in terms of how it impacts specifically the town budget? And keeping it in that frame?
Yes, I mean, I think the state is in big trouble in some ways.
Well, and I
Residents are certainly are.
I think that, our community is also experiencing things well
Yeah.
outside of the town budget, right? That are-
Yes,
That are-
individuals,
that will
residents.
impact our town greatly over time. So I'm just thinking about how much to take on.
Right. And
In
our
a conversation.
Our job is to worry about the town budget
Exactly.
and services
Focus.
being delivered.
Staying focused.
So it's not like the other things don't matter.
Right,
It's just, this is the frame, right?
Yes,
And
yes.
many things bear on that,
Right.
but how do you frame up the conversation?
And I think at a very least, it would be beneficial to. We kind of live in these numbers during the normal course of doing business and going through our budgeting process. And making kind of those discretionary decisions. And we try to do that in a way that is, transparent and includes folks in that conversation, but. The amount of community feedback is often fairly limited, and I think. If some of these things come to full fruition, there are going to be some pretty significant shifts and kind of policy and decision-making calculus. That I think would be beneficial for getting the community involved in and ahead of, so, if it's a public forum that needs to be scheduled, sometime in the next couple of months, to start working through a more consolidated list of these things, what are the things that we are going to prioritize should we be faced with some pretty significant shifts. I think a good example of that would be, changing maybe how we structure our capital plans for the road department or the highway department. Right now we have a very specific model of keeping newer vehicles and rotating them out on a certain timeline, which is already hard to stick to because the delivery of those trucks takes so long. Do we need to consider shifting how we're going to be looking at that, or coordinating shared services around maintenance plans or programs with other communities? Which kind of dovetails into that conversation, which is, right now at the state level, there's a lot of dialogue around how the smaller communities working together to pool resources, and share resources. And I think that is gonna be kind of a sticky conversation. I think theoretically, it makes a lot of sense to, but in practice, there's a certain loss of autonomy that comes with that. And how do we get ahead of that dialogue?
So one thing that I did want to mention on this, because I think sharing costs and expenses and equipment and all that expertise and everything else is one of the ways forward, is that there is a second meeting of the Winooski River Watershed folks. Did you all receive the email about that as well as me? Okay.
Yeah.
Because I went to that first one. And we might want a couple of people to go to the second one. It's an opportunity to talk to people in a forum in which that's what everyone wants to talk about, is like, how can we work together and how can we learn from one another and how can we move forward and how can we save money? So, I'm glad you all got it. I wasn't sure. And, I think that anyone who wants to go just has to sign up ahead of time.
Well, I wonder if I'm sorry.
I believe it came to the select board email.
Yeah,
Okay.
I wonder if there's, I don't think that there's anybody tasked with this at the state level, or maybe even within CVRPC at like a broader level. I think they're more initiative specific. But I'm wondering if there's a way to get our hooks into somebody who's more regularly thinking about these things, and have them on the agenda once every other month. Usually we just have CVRPC come in, when there's a particular initiative or something that we need to be participating in. And it's hard, I think we have a delegate, or two delegates,
Right.
to CVRPC to attend those meetings. So I think we're gonna have to lean either on the delegates or lean on the organization, to have a more active dialogue, in our agendas. Yeah,
I like that.
Do we have any, we don't know yet if CVRPC is active, is thinking about this. Like,
I don't.
mean, I think that's the question, right? That we can
Yeah,
find out from them to what extent they're already contemplating something just like this, of
Yeah.
where is their opportunity for coordination and so forth.
Everybody does planning in RPC, but there's a person that helps specifically with town plans. That'd be my first thought of who to contact about this.
Yeah.
and I wonder if in the interim, we have a member of the select board who ends up also, being a liaison, to just keep in those conversations. I think the other tricky part is like, if we're actively trying to facilitate conversations with Marshfield, Woodbury, or East Calais, and we want to be having those dialogues as select boards, it gets really hard from scheduling and warning meetings. So I think we need to be a little deliberate in how we're tasking folks with staying on top of those conversations. Otherwise, we'll just have huge meetings that are hard to come out of.
I guess there's a reason we haven't done more collaboration partnering, because it's so challenging.
It's all, yeah, it's really inefficient, I think that gets really challenging for me to think about, okay, well, now you're counting on each of the individual municipalities to start engaging in these conversations, and they're still not benefiting from the other conversations that may be being had a little further afield. There needs to be a conduit for that conversation, and an opportunity for learnings to come more efficiently down to the municipality level. What subjects just to probably not bother having, and which ones make a lot of sense to try to have. Especially with the rural communities being so far away from each other, I think often these types of opportunities get brought as like, oh, well, you could share on like wastewater infrastructure. It's just, we don't have wastewater infrastructure, and we're certainly not gonna stand one up like as our first, step to collaborating with one of the other communities.
we could step on the third rail like school consolidation too.
Well, exactly, it's helpful to come into that with some greater context that is beyond our own. Where we might have some wins, so that we start building that participation equity a little bit as a community. And actually start seeing some results. Yeah, anyway. Yeah.
I'm in contact with most of the clerks around Calais, like bordering. I know Worcester has expressed the most interest in how can we share resources. They already work with Buffy. If we wanted to switch to a full-time assessor, they would be willing to share an assessor with us, moving from the Lister model. There have been a number of occasions when they have said, if you guys want to pursue this, let's talk about it. So that's one town that has specifically said, hey, if you start moving forward, we want to be a part of it.
The Worcester Town Clerk also often comes to emergency management, Calais emergency management events.
Wow.
Thank you, Tegan. I mean, I very anecdotally feel, I just have kind of the sense that those conversations relative to, you know, maybe I'm making too many assumptions here, but like, it seems like that conversation with Worcester, Woodbury and Marshfield makes a lot more sense. It just see from like a topographic population, there seems to be more similarities there that might make some of that dialogue a little easier to work through than it would be to. I mean, it seems also natural to talk to East Montpelier, but it just seems like they're also a lot different in a lot of different ways.
I feel, I don't disagree with that, I feel like we have to go in completely open-minded.
Yeah.
And see what comes, we may get a hard no initially, or we might, you know, it's great to hear Worcester, that'd be a great place to start, because
Yeah.
start generating a list of what's possible. And then shop that list around with others
Yeah.
too, and, you know, maybe something comes, it's sort of high risk, high reward, maybe, I don't know, but, you know, I don't know how towns are thinking about it yet, but they will be, they will be.
Right, I think this sort of line of thought, a lot of people are probably starting to have these conversations, like Mark Mahaly did a meet and greet at the store the other day, and he and I, we had a lot of conversation about sort of how the legislature is having these conversations. And one thing that struck me is they have a process, I don't think it's called an executive committee, but they have a process for addressing significant budget issues while they're not in session, right? Normally they do. And one of the things they've done is bolstered and changed and improved and strengthened that process in preparation for potentially having big.
It has to do with federal funding, right? And then a certain percentage decrease, the joint fiscal office just has to be notified.
Right.
And then at higher thresholds, then a committee comes together, a executive.
Right,
committee,
yeah, but it's
yeah.
like doing that, they're doing that preparation work, anticipating, you know,
Right.
potentially having these big
Because
conversations.
26% of their revenue comes from the
Right,
federal government.
right. And they're in the same situation we are, in which you don't know, we don't know.
Right.
Which of these things on your list is gonna happen in what order? But, yeah, I think a lot of people will be interested in these conversations.
Well, we're at the time for our next agenda item. I'm wanting to kind of keep things on track and move on. Tegan, I wonder, and Kari, if we could kind of start working on pulling on the Worcester thread and lining up a whatever they want, a meeting. I mean, we can try to, I'm happy to try to find some time, and Kari and I can try to meet, unless there's other folks who are feeling super motivated to do that.
Yeah, why don't we make that one concrete
make
thing to
that,
work on,
yep.
is an initial conversation with Worcester. Jordan and I, Tegan, do you feel like you should be part of that?
I don't have to, you guys.
Yeah, whoever the comparable side on the Worcester, I mean, they're either their select board, or I don't know if their town clerk is more active in trying to facilitate those, or
Starting to find out
who would be interested in, yes.
then we can get a better, to best communicate with that person.
Great.
Okay.
We'll work on that.
Great. Well, thanks for pulling that together, Kari. A lot to think about.
When, remind me when you normally start working on the budget? Me.
Last year, we looked at the capital budget in August. I think that was the very first thing we did.
End of August.
And actually, something that Jordan and Jamie suggested is we do that sooner, like maybe even May 12th, as a way to, you know,
Start the process.
think about
It's the-
priorities.
It's the same thing of just like, what are the blocks
Yeah.
of work that we could sort of open up the book and see like, okay, these are all the places where we might have a variable that is either known, like healthcare, we know the expenses are gonna go way up, or we don't know because there's federal dollar impact on
Right.
these things, or
Right.
something like that, so that we're kind of not
So if it makes sense, we could include a capital budget discussion in the May 12th meeting. Or at least June 2nd, if it's.
I think that's a good way to start the conversation. I'm now kind of wondering if there's a way that we should like look at the budget and look at what has like the biggest chunks and also look at our kind of adjoining communities and see where there might be like overlapping significant costs. I mean, it's gonna be costs associated with maintaining roads, and it's gonna be healthcare and benefit costs for staff. I think are gonna be the two huge
Oh, yeah.
buckets, you know, and so second to that, knowing how the budgeting process has gone, everything else seems incremental by comparison. So that, I think that will help frame the kind of conversation as we start to reach out to other communities and say like, these are our big expense areas. These are big expense areas that we know other communities also have. How do we get creative in pooling resources or purchasing power, whatever it is? Very good. So the next agenda item is appointment procedure and policy review. So this is again a pretty early initial conversation. We touched on it in the previous meeting. A little context is that Jamie had dug up a copy of Berry City's policy that governs or guides their appointment process. And as I kind of was going through reviewing that, there were some helpful things in there that kind of align with the work that we've been doing to try to standardize our appointment process and make it more transparent, align it with staff and select board workflow so that certain appointments can be made deliberatively and with good consideration, as well as setting expectations around, you know, just in general about like what the appointment process is going to look like. So I did a first like very crude pass at modifying that policy and right sizing it for us. I've got hard copies. I very hastily sent it around a few hours before our meeting. Partly because as I was going through this, I don't want to make substantive unilateral decisions about what goes in and what doesn't. So tonight I just kind of wanted to make sure everybody had a copy of it and has the opportunity to kind of go through it and have some initial dialogue about what does make sense for Calais and what may not make sense, comfort levels. Certainly if there are still areas where city manager is listed, I thought I did a control F, but apparently not well enough. I certainly did it for city and none of the city things came up, which is weird. So broader strokes of what the policy includes is a purpose. It's kind of a hybrid between a policy and a procedure. So I've been kind of wrestling with that language. I think at this point, it probably makes the most sense to call it a policy. And then in the language, it's clear to say that that this is a guiding framework, and that it does not intend to undermine the authority that is given to the select board for making certain appointments as it needs to, but it certainly defines the procedure for doing that. One of the things that was missing from the Berry one is just kind of a list of supporting documents. So right now Barbara's very organized around appointments and already has kind of an appointment list that she maintains and circulates to us when there's a decision. So this kind of just formalizes the existence of that and sets expectations about what information is included in that appointment list. just to, again, try to stay organized around it. The persons affected, is kind of a wonky one, to leave in there. But it just kind of lists various stakeholders, who may be impacted by the policy. I did highlight, some, actually, I'm noticing. There's only one thing highlighted. Maybe the reason you're still seeing city manager stuff in there is because it didn't automatically save all of the edits that I had made. That's a problem. Well, you're looking at a fresher document than I had originally intended. So my apologies. Oh, man.
It seems like, it just modifies many of the practices that we already have. There might be some slightly
does.
different. He says obviously the June 30th end date is one of the most significant differences.
Yeah, so one of the things that we've been spending a lot of time kind of talking about is like, where do we draw the line between individual appointments, and then you know, municipal body appointments, and what are the timelines and appointment processes associated with that? So it looks like one of the edits that was included in there was kind of the organization of and classification of municipal bodies, which would be the Development Review Board, Design Advisory Board, Planning Commission, Conservation Commission, Historic, all the commissions, committees, and boards. And then the individual appointees and delegates, which at this point are, they're all annual appointments. Barbara, I think, rightly brought up the consideration that maybe some of these we want to make 2-year or 3-year appointments. Part of this is really taking a look at like how many appointments need to be made every year, and is it reasonable to think that those can be made with due consideration if there are so many of them. So I tried to be careful about language so that individual appointments aren't called annual appointments in the event that that changes. Also lists as a classification, delegation to regional bodies, which again, kind of falls into that individual appointment list, but just kind of captures that. And then it moves into policy and procedures. The establishment, combination or abolition abolition of a municipal body, which is kind of a heavy clause, but it does trigger some other procedures that I think make sense to leave it in there. Essentially saying that if the select board is going to stand up a committee, that it has an obligation to define its charge, define the number of committee members, and outline the specifics around what and why and how. For a new committee. The other thing that was kind of interesting about the Berry City one is that it puts a recommendation or encouragement for the select board to consider consolidating boards and committees that have shared purpose or overlapping purposes and functions. And that one's really interesting to me. You know, we live in a community of good knowledge and skilled individuals, but you know, at some point, the number of committees that you have just makes it harder to add or seek volunteers. It also and make sure that those volunteers who are appointed to those committees are using their time efficiently. And do we want to define a process for regularly checking in with committees and seeing if there is overlap to navigate how we might want to consolidate those recommendations? In the era of Doge, I think that is a tricky conversation to have politically, but that is certainly not the intent. I mean, I really think it's a serious matter to think about, you know, if we want if we want to be fostering community engagement with skilled individuals, of, you know, multiple generations and experiences and backgrounds, we need to be thinking about like how those people are allocating their time and how much time, it takes for the public to keep up with the business of so many different committees, and having so many different meetings. So, you know, I'd like to see that language stayed in there. I don't have an opinion about how that work gets done. But at least it's in there and it's an intent that is, verbalized. Classification, I'm just tries to push folks towards maintaining some consistency. That language is actually not terribly clear to me in the Berry City one. So I tried to massage it a little bit, relative to the classification of commissions versus committees versus boards, but more importantly, it says that there will be a delineation between ad hoc and standing, and that will be included in the charge.
Can I say something?
Sure, Doug.
I'd like to have Mark give me a call sometime. I have an idea how to clean up somebody's mess hole, like Frank's Farm around the country. I know how to do it. I really know how to do it. And, you know, down there, they got 3 4-wheelers, they're going by my house, they're up on Woodbury Mountain, and they're making a hell of a mess. And then every night they go by, they're screaming, and they're working for Casellas, and they stay in that little love shack. Okay?
All right, Doug, I'm not quite sure how this is relevant to this.
Huh?
It sounds more like you have specific ideas about an ordinance or state law that you want to.
Yeah, I wanna make, I wanna have the law, and I know how to do it. I may be a dumb farmer, but I know how to do it. Frank's starving their cows, and we're talking about dollars.
Okay, thanks, Doug.
That's true. Go by there and look at theirs and look at mine.
Thank you, Doug. So again, we could go on in the nitty gritty of this, and it looks like I need to try to recirculate the ones that I have, like basically the second half of the edits, more relevant to the procedure. I guess what I'd ask that as folks read through this, if they could just send feedback maybe to me directly on areas that they have opinions on, either verbiage or would like to go into greater discussion about. And then we can put it on the agenda for our next meeting with some of those recommendations and incorporations. My hope is that I think it'd be pretty reasonable to think that we could have something fairly clean and refined within the next meeting or two. I'd like to have something adopted by the 1st of January, assuming that, with the big assumption that everybody's comfortable with this in concept.
1st of January?
Or I'm sorry, it's 1st of June. 1st of June, sorry.
That should be okay.
No, first of,
You're trying to put in place.
1st of June.
Appointments coming.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and I guess, anyway, we don't have to belabor it.
No, go ahead.
Just the titling something policy and procedure just is a challenge.
I think that that's an important conversation to have. And now is probably as good a time as any to really kind of unpack it a little bit if we can, but.
I mean, the process for adopting a policy is what I'm curious about, and what that encumbers us to do versus having a procedure.
Adopting a. I don't know that they're significantly different.
Okay, I mean, I didn't know if if the select board is adopting a policy, does that require us to do something different than if we were, do we have to have a public discussion? Is this the same as sort of how we're Do we have other policies? I guess that would be the question.
We do.
Yes, you just need to warn it,
yeah.
and then I'm gonna ready to vote. It's
Yeah.
not like an ordinance, which is.
Okay, thank you. I finally articulated what I was trying to say.
An ordinance require a hearing and
Right.
there's that curing period and all that.
Can I clarify? An ordinance is a town law, so it
Yes.
affects everybody,
Right.
whereas policies are specifically things that just affect how we get our business done.
Done. Thank
And that's why it only requires you all to just approve it.
All right, thank you, Tegan. Well said.
But I do think that there should be a period of time and enough warning that, particularly for this type of policy, for public to see, a refined, I wouldn't want to put it out there too soon and then, just open a can of worms, and pull us in too many different directions. But if we can work on refining it and get it posted, along with the warrant agenda, I think that'd be a good opportunity for soliciting some feedback on it, though it does incorporate a lot of what we've been trying to work towards over the last year and a half. So I would hope that it'd be.
You're gonna
relatively-
circulate us.
Yeah, I'm gonna
Okay.
have to
Okay,
check to see if I somehow missed something.
okay.
Or just do them all over again. In the meantime, in reviewing this one and or the Berry City one, if there's particular elements that that you would like to weigh in on, please send those to me directly, and you can't cross collaborate, but I can be the repository for all of that. Well, very good. So we'll move on to reports. Ordinance advisory.
We met, Dot gave us feedback on the three that we had already covered, which is really helpful, and we agreed with most of her changes, they were good. We hadn't looked at them in a couple of months, we had set them aside, which was always kind of the plan. And so it was nice to go back and tweak some things. Emily also wanted to provide feedback, but she was unable to attend last time. So we're hoping to sort of finish up those three at the next meeting on May 5th and really start digging into the right of way with our new members.
Great.
So
Jane and Bill can add.
Would those then come to the select board?
Yeah.
They can,
To start, so you guys can approve it and then do the public approval. Process.
thank you. Is the dog ordinance on the list?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
It might be clarified a little.
Mhm.
And if you all want, well, I guess you can't attend, but if you want to take a peek at the draft we have currently is on the website. So if you all want to look at it and email feedback to us, so that we have that going forward.
Great, thank you.
Tegan, do you have any other reports, town clerk related?
We're plugging away with Moving to the Cloud. There have been some hiccups. It's not super straightforward, but RV Tech is trying to work out their kinks and we are trying to work out our kinks and we'll get there. It's been fun. We're working on getting John's laptop for zoning because his old one is not doing the trick anymore. No, it's been fairly quiet. A lot of people coming in and doing research. And so I've been trying to continue organizing and cross-referencing my files so that it's easier for people to find out if they have a septic permit hidden in the file somewhere. We have a survey map that helps them figure out their boundary line. A lot of that is not easy to find without a lot of digging, and I'm trying to make it easier.
Thank you, Tegan. Financial report from Kari.
Yeah, so Barbara and Christie and Bill and I spent almost an hour on the financials last week when we did the second part two of our onboarding. And that included going through this set of financial statements in great detail, so I'll just give the top level. The revenue were right on budget. General government's 93%, highway department's 114% of budget. Expenditures are at 79 and 92%. And we're three quarters of the way through the year, so we're definitely running high on highway side. General fund balance, 493,000, and fund balance is assets less liabilities, essentially our cash position. And then, the due from report, the big takeaway there is that the FEMA fund still has a negative balance. So that means, we're waiting on remaining reimbursements. We won't receive 100%, so we'll have to address that, at some point, but we'll see where it ends up. I'd say, overall, not a big change from last month, and we're in good shape. Any questions? Or comments?
Is there anything coming up that you are looking for?
The biggest thing coming up is the education tax, what we call true up, which is, we carry out I think it's $212,000 liability, which is what we expect to be the remaining payment, but it's never exactly that. The Agency of Education, I'm not sure exactly what they do, but they determine what the final balance is. I think it has to do with adjustments from people receiving homestead declarations and things like that, just the changes that happen over the course of the year. So that I expect you will see in your next warrant. But we've already more or less accounted for that in these statements. We've made all the large payments. I think we're still waiting on one bill from the East Montclair ambulance service. For some reason, they haven't invoiced us, but everything else is more or less of the large payments were done. And I was processing payroll today and we had almost no overtime, which was wonderful to see. There's so much overtime over the course of this winter.
Yeah.
So we're in
Good time of year for that.
new era. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's a great, great time of year for that to be happening. Great.
Should I move into my report?
Please.
So, you saw in the memo, we received both the Class 2 highway grant and the structures grant, so that's good. Appears that we did not get the ash tree grant, but that's, win a few, lose a few. Did you not see that in there?
Yeah.
We weren't communicated that, but I saw their newsletter and we weren't on the list. Let's two and two together. I'll check my thinking on this, but I'm thinking that we probably wanna try to find a way to pursue repaving of half of County Road this year.
Yeah.
It's gonna be $42,000 that we have to come up with. And I can bring you a recommendation about how to address that, probably when we get closer to the year end. We might even wanna wait till the auditors have sort of said, this is your fund balance. Although, one of the other items on my list is that we're putting the CV truck up for auction because we're not using it anymore. So our asking price, minimum price that we're setting in the auction, we're not revealing it, is in that neighborhood. And we're gonna do 35 or 40,000 just based on my comparables. So we may have a bit of a windfall there that we could use. But my thinking with doing that is that, one of the things going into this fiscal situation is taking advantage of every grant for work that you deem essential. If it's not essential, that's another matter, but if you deem it essential, take free money when you can. And if we could do it this year, get half done, we could pursue another grant next year and maybe get all of it. We still have Marshfield to think about, because we have many other things. We have this grant in hand, so.
I think my concern about that one is it seems like it would be easy for the state to change how it funds those projects. Maybe not this year, but even in the second half of this year, make a decision that could put delaying that, it somehow prioritize the deferred maintenance that they're already struggling to figure out how they're going to fund. I could very easily see a situation where the state prioritizes their own paving activity and funding and that sort of thing. And then, especially with the condition of the county road, that we would get bit by that.
So the legislature sets these amounts in their budget, and as far as this grant goes, we don't have a grant agreement signed yet, but once we do, that's a contract.
Yeah,
And I wouldn't think the state would try to back out of that.
right.
In terms of next year's budget, you're exactly right. What the House approved shows decreases for, class 2 and for structures, so a lot on the structures side.
Yeah,
Which is all the more reason to do.
Get it while you can.
Yeah.
Get it while you
Yeah.
can and do the half of
Yeah.
the county road.
Okay, all right,
I think.
yeah, all right, so we don't have to make this decision tonight, but I want this one.
Okay.
So then FEMA, give us and take away. 2023, we did get an official notice at the end of last week saying certain projects have been de-obligated because of their federal aid highways. Remember that whole
Right.
discussion? And the amount that they're asking to be returned is $60,165. And I got a chance to verify those numbers, that is correct. So I let them know, the select board has to approve that, so I'll bring that to you in 2 weeks. Hopefully by then, we've either received
That
or.
was my question. Can we wait till?
We-
well, so we received approval, right, for the
Yeah, yes,
reimbursement for the highways? Yeah,
we've been told that, we've seen I think it's an obligation, I think that's what they call it. That the Federal Highway Administration recognizes that those same projects. Are worth that amount, and they're actually, the amount is greater than $60,165.
Right.
So
And when do
I
we-
would love to have that in the bank before I cut
Right.
this check.
And do we expect it in a
We
reasonable?
don't know,
timeframe?
we don't, I
We
mean,
don't-
this whole process is completely different.
Yeah,
Well, you know what's interesting about this particular one is the state, it sort of does all the administration, I mean, they asked us for the numbers, but they put the package together and then present it to the Federal Highway Administration, and then they tack on an upcharge.
oh, gee,
5% is what they charge. But that doesn't come out of our end,
Okay.
it's just between them. Anyway, it's just a different piece.
yeah.
So that's what's going on there.
do we have a certain timeline that we have to approve the FEMA?
I took it that we need to get that money back in 2 weeks.
Busy.
We're very busy.
I told them.
Oh, no.
If you're getting a busy signal on that end, I guess you can get a busy signal on this end.
I guess, I don't wanna jeopardize our relationship with the
Yeah,
state,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
because they've been great, they've been really good to work with.
Right.
Yeah. And the other thing is that we did launch the direct debit tax payment option.
nice.
Last week, no one's taken us up yet. I don't think anyone wants to think about tax
Yeah,
payment.
it's on the website, I saw that.
Yeah. And we'll do more announcements, and I expect we will have some people.
Yeah.
Great, thank you, Kari.
You've got your interviews this week.
Yeah, we have 3 interviews lined up for Thursday for the road. Road condition inventory. Data collector.
Yeah.
So 3
Wow.
seemingly qualified people,
That's great,
all Calais residents.
even better, that's great. Well, thank you, Kari, I appreciate it, and thanks to everybody else, thank you, Barbara. And unless anybody has any other questions or comments, I think we'll adjourn.
And have some public.
And have, yeah,
I can't hear.
yeah.
So moved.
Second and approved, even though I know that we don't have to do that. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
That's that. 4 minutes.
Good job.
Good job.
Well,
Well done.
I would.